This is Mark Walsh from the Embodied Facilitator course. This video is on how to be ethical. So, across different disciplines, whether I'm talking to coaches, yoga people, whatever, there's this idea that ethics is important. Of course, yeah. So, really important thing. We have our ethical standards for how we do business, whether it's, avoiding dual relationships, confidentiality, blah 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 blah. So, really important stuff. What I don't hear though is a dialogue about how to be ethical, because I trust that most people in this business are basically good people. There's the odd psychopath, but most people seem good people. But then we also have just across the board like massive corruption, like massive scandals. It's almost harder to find a yoga teacher or say like personal growth guru or whatever who isn't involved in these scandals than the one who is. It's so common. So what happens? Well, there is a selection thing about who sort of tries to get famous and blah blah blah. But assuming people like me, are in that field and have at least some good intention, some good heart, what happens to them along the way? This whole power corrupts is the quick answer. So how do we stay ethical as we gain in prestige, in money, in whatever? Yeah, the worldly wins, as the Buddhists say. Rather than just say you should not do this. Well, we get tempted, right? We all get tempted. That's human. So ways to be ethical. For me, one is looking at the situations I place myself in. Yeah. So, for example, it's easy to say don't sleep with your students. Yeah, great. Totally agree with that. And would I let a young female student I was attracted to stay at my house? No, because that would be putting myself in a situation which wouldn't be smart, right? Makes sense. The same with financial things, having checks and balances there. I think a big one is the internal work, so doing therapy, right? And no amount of kind of conscious work is going to be a substitute for therapy. This might upset some people, but one of the great gifts of the West is the therapeutic tradition, looking at the shadow, the unconscious, which by definition we're not going to see just looking consciously, and that does need support. I'm paying the arse, this one costs money, but hey, if you're getting some success, you need something to spend it on. So doing the shadow work, doing the therapy, that leads us to what we could call supervision. So no therapist would do therapy without having what's called a supervisor. This is becoming more common in coaching and yoga, for example, which I think is only a good thing. We need our supervisors, mentors, could be separate, but could be the same. And our peers, people to be accountable to. That is something I like to build into systems and structures in what I'm doing. So, for example, on the Embodied Facilitator course, there's always a co-trainer. It's Vilya in Russia, Frankie in England, and they can veto any decision I make. They can literally just say, no, we're not doing that without explanation. And even though I own the company, they can still make that decision. So that's a good kind of, that's an example of like a practical check and balance that you can put in place, is not having the sort of guru type position structurally in a system. And then, there's the internal work around that as well. But if you have the structural stuff in place, the kind of common sense, keeping out of harm's way, that's very helpful. I think learning to self-regulate is really important. So the centering around pleasure as well as around pain. Big one. So learning self-regulation skills, just taking care of my basic well-being. So I'm at an airport now, got up early, pretty strung out. You can probably hear the airport stuff in the background. Apologies for that, normal bullshit. And this is a situation where I'm needing to look after myself, whether it's meditating on the plane, trying to find some good food, getting some good rest tonight. These are the things I do when I'm traveling, because I know when I'm tired, I find it harder to resist temptation, and also I'm just like meaner, like I'm less nice, right? So there's some of my first thoughts on how to be ethical. Giving oneself to a system is another one. So for me, I'm a Theravada Buddhist. You don't agree with all of it, but I've given myself to a system. What that means is, and this could be a coaching code of conduct from the ICF, for example. It means that every single decision can be put to something which isn't my own ego, because it's really easy to lie to oneself. Yeah. So systems, self-regulation, shadow work, peers, mentors, accountability, blah blah blah. I hope that helps on how to be ethical.